not having a competent and expert realtor on your team really can lead to significant unintended consequences because we're not all real estate. It's for the same reason you don't do your estate planning documents yourself and you go to an estate planning attorney like me, is you go to a professional realtor. It's a full-time realtor that's been doing it for a long time, that really has a ear to the market, really, and knows what is happening in the market, knows how to market your property, knows how to sell, right? That knows where the buyers are. And so it really makes a difference, significant difference. So if you didn't learn anything today, what I would recommend learning is using expert realtor who really knows what they're doing is critical in maximizing that asset for the benefit of yourself and your estate and your beneficiaries down the road.
You are listening to the Legacy Talk podcast hosted by James A. Jones,
attorney at law and founder of Sound Legacy Law, PLLC in Tacoma.
Attorney Jones is here to talk about how to best protect your family, assets, and wealth, pulling stories from his more than 20 years of helping families and business owners protect their assets, create their estate plans, preserve their wealth, and plan for the future. Nobody wants to think about estate planning, but life has a way of sneaking up on you, and at any moment, something unexpected could happen that will leave you regretting not having acted sooner. So join Attorney James A. Jones in the Legacy Talk podcast and together learn how to plan for your future today and have peace of mind tomorrow.
Welcome to Legacy Talk. I'm your host, James Jones. I'm an estate planning and probate attorney in Tacoma, Washington. I've been practicing for over 20 years, and my main practice areas are estate planning, probate, and estate administration. On Legacy Talk, we discuss topics surrounding families and estates. Estate planning is often a confusing and complicated topic, but my goal with this podcast is to make it accessible and understandable to those who need it. So if this is something that interests you, I'd appreciate it if you click the subscribe button and like this episode so that you can follow along as we break down the barriers to estate planning. I'm excited to get to today's topic. Today's topic is estate planning and real estate. Key things to consider about your home as an asset, because many of us neglect to consider our home one of our major assets. So on today's show, we're talking about estate planning and real estate, key things to consider about your home as an asset. So let's get to it. The American dream. If you go back through modern history, the American dream is home ownership. Home ownership was once a rite of passage in our country. While it's still a major goal of most people, it's becoming more and more difficult to realize this dream. Additionally, most homeowners fail to consider their home as an asset as to how it relates to their estate plan. They fail to see that their home, being their main asset in many cases, is an avenue for future wealth creation, future planning, familial stability, among other things. And so on today's episode, I'm excited to welcome my second guest on the Legacy Talk podcast. I'm excited to have Nick Lind, who's a local realtor from Tacoma, on the show this week. Nick is the founder of Commencement Bay Brokers in Tacoma. He's been in the real estate game since 2008 or so, and he started small: cold calling, door knocking, Craigslist ads. Anything he could do to drum up business, Nick did it. And he quickly became one of the leading agents in the area at the brokers he was at. Nick then went on to set up Commencement Bay Brokers, which is one of the premier brokerage houses here in Tacoma. Commencement Bay Brokers is now one of the most successful independent boutique real estate firms in the state. Nick's long-term focus has been on building relationships in the community and changing people's lives through real estate. Nick loves what he does. He's passionate about the city of Tacoma, and you'll hear that in our interview, and Tacoma's potential. And you'll hear that some interesting tidbits with regard to how to treat your home, right? What you should consider with regard to your home. How does that home fit into your real estate holdings? How does it fit into your estate plan that an attorney might help you with? How does having a realtor on your team as an advisor help you in the long run? We always talk about we'll have a CPA or we have a lawyer, we have a financial advisor, but we should also consider having a realtor, and we get more into that in the discussion. So we'll get right to that here. All right, awesome. Again, we're here with Nick Lind today. Nick's a real estate agent, which you just heard. Been working about 15 years. Appreciate you being here, Nick.
Yeah, James, thanks for having me. I'm grateful that you chose to invite me, and really passionate about sharing what we've learned surrounding real estate. And if it can help some of the people you're connected to, then that's going to be awesome.
Yeah, I really appreciate you being here. So before we really get into this like discussion, tell us a little bit about yourself, like maybe personal side stuff. What got you into real estate, that kind of thing.
Oh man, yeah. Well, I didn't get into real estate because I thought it was cool. I played college baseball, and one of my former teammates and then former business partners, you kind of saw me at my last job. So I was a community service major. So I've got kind of the servant's heart. I was going down a social work track, and I was working for the city of Des Moines at the time with their teen programs, at-risk teen programs, and doing some other things in the public eye. And it wasn't fulfilling. My friend saw that and said, "Hey, I think you need to try something different." I move slow, right? Like I'm not just the jump all head first into things kind of guy, and maybe sometimes my detriment. About a year later, the same friend called me after I'd interviewed with several different folks, looked at several different career paths. He said, "Hey, you should be on my real estate team." And I said, "Oh my gosh, real estate. I hate salespeople." And so I think that's why you're going to be good. You're honest, you do the work, you take good care of people. And I think you'll do a great job if you join me. So that's how I got here. But I think that one of the things that has been really impactful is, I was working in a community oriented space, right? We're trying to help people. One of my big ahas is that this process of real estate and pulling all of the pieces together surrounding what people need to do to protect their real estate, such as connecting with great estate planners like yourself, it makes a difference. It matters, and it matters a lot. And I felt like we make a bigger impact with the individual clients that we serve than I ever did when I was trying to help the public.
No, that's great. I think our fields are very similar because we're both in that like service, like we want to help people get to a certain point, right? Like our goals are not unsimilar, right? Like our goals are we want to make sure people have their stuff in order, want to make sure they're making the right decisions with regards to like major life decisions which involve your estate plan, but also like should I buy that house? Or is that the right house
Yeah,
for me? Or should I buy that investment property? Right?
correct. When there's so much chatter too, right? So we get in the mix with our clients really early on. And it's interesting to me. I think our clients take our work pretty serious. I'll hear things like, "Well, I didn't want to bother you because I'm not ready yet." Do you hear some of the same stuff with people that you onboard?
Yeah, no, you're right. It's like I'm not really ready yet, or I'm still fleshing this out. And I think that's one of the biggest things, right? That's kind of a misnomer, maybe, is like we don't want to talk to you until you know exactly what you want to do, right? But I
Yes.
feel like our
Yes.
role in this process is sort of helping people make that decision and really, sort of putting the pieces together that they've got all these ideas, right? But our goal is sort of to make this process work, right? And put these pieces together in what it's supposed to look like, because that's kind of where we come in, right?
That's exactly it. So many times we're saying, well, that's fine. In fact, the earlier we get involved, probably the better. So let's just take these pieces of information, put all of your cards on the table, and decide if you have a hand that we can play now, or maybe it's not viable. Like in my space, maybe we take a look and we say, "Hey, based on where you're at, the budget's not going to make sense for you to buy the type of home that you want. So what we'll do is we'll wait. We'll make sure that you are steadily improving credit, that you are staying on track with what's happening in the market, that you're not doing anything that's detrimental to that long-term vision. And when the time is right, we'll let you know that then." Right. And, so I love helping people put that together. And one of the things that we've added as a tagline to our company is that we believe we're changing lives through real estate, and so I'm 15 years in, right? And 15 years is about 3 sales cycles in our market. People tend to move about every 5 years.
Hmm.
And when you see people buy their first home, cycle up to 5 years down the road, and they call us to say, "Oh my gosh, I need a bigger house, something changed, or I got a promotion, I'm having a baby. Hey, what do I do?" Like to be able to take a look at the equity they've built up over time and to say, "Hey, I got some great news. Your house is worth, 25% more than what you paid for it. And because of that, we can not only move you into a new house for a similar payment because of all the equity that you've received in this market, we might be able to pay some of that nagging debt down, the student loan debt, the credit card debt." Like that is impactful stuff. And so I really love helping our clients learn how to break into the market because I've been able to see what it does for them down the road. And it is a big deal. Most of our clients, their house is about 50% of their total net worth, whether they know it or not, because we're living in the house. We're not looking at the house as a major investment. A lot of times we're living in the house. We know we should buy a house, but we don't always know what that impact really is.
Yeah.
And it's great stuff to be able to share that with them.
Yeah, and that's, when we first met, one of the first things you told me is like to view that house. Like we always think of our house. Like I gotta have a house. It's the American dream to have this house. Like that's I get my job, I get married, I buy a house, right? Like,
Mhm.
and we view it sort of as okay, this is where I'm gonna live. But like you mentioned to me one of the first times we met is like looking at that house as an investment and how you can leverage that house to move up, right? And to maximize the effect of having that real estate ownership. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. And what you're really saying is like, what are the tactics behind making sure that you know when to move up in the market, how to move up in the market responsibly? Because we all want things. Like it's a human nature, it's an American culture thing. We want things. We want the bigger house. We want to keep up with the Joneses. Well, keeping up with the Joneses isn't really healthy. But if you have a strategy that says this is when you buy a house, this is when you buy a bigger house, and this is why, then it makes sense, right? So I've got a business mentor who is near and dear to me. I talk to him once a week. He is, boy, a millionaire and then some, like a decamillionaire.
Mm.
And he teaches me strategies around wealth building. And just for those watching out there, I am not in that category. I would like to be on that track. I do believe in being really responsible and teaching people how to grow their wealth. And real estate bucket is a big piece of it. So again, the American dream is to buy a house. The reason why is because that house becomes a vehicle to wealth. So we teach people the numbers behind why that matters and how it happens, the leverage behind real estate. And I don't have a whiteboard, so I'm not going to draft it out here. But, for all intents and purposes, the average sale price in Tacoma is $575,000. And the recommended down payment is anywhere from 3.5% to 5%, 3.5% to 10% down payment for somebody's first house. And the return on buying a home over time, even if the home appreciates more conservatively than the stock market, is the return on the $575,000 house, even though you put down $25,000 to $50,000. So you're receiving a 5% return on a big asset. And that is a big deal. So we teach our clients to work towards buying a house by saving 5% down and then also retaining up to $25,000 in cash reserves. So if they have a problem, they know how to take care of it. They don't have to charge it. So we're trying to teach our clients how to break into the housing market responsibly, right? And everybody has a different starting point. But the beautiful thing is that if we teach our clients to buy a house and own a home with a debt load that is about 3 times what they earn annually, then we can begin to leverage that house into more and more wealth. And it's a strategy my wife and I employed. And I'm telling you that the way that the equity has grown is matching everything we put in our retirement accounts. And obviously we have to have a house to live in, but it's a strategy that we teach our clients because eventually most of us are going to downsize or cash out of the market. And again, like that's part of your job, is helping people understand what the plan is when they're going to exit the market. And when we have employed that and seen firsthand what that has done for us, it makes me really passionate to teach other people how to do it. And guess what? They don't have to be the expert. We're the expert. We
Right.
just want to make sure that the budget's right. And the cool thing is that we live in a great house. I feel super fortunate, super blessed. I sat on my deck last night and got a chance to look over the bay. And I wouldn't have had that opportunity if we didn't break into the housing market. And I'm able to do that without stretching myself to a point where it's dangerous financially. I didn't buy it just because I thought it was cool. It was tactical. It was strategic. It's also the right house for our family. So we get to have a great life, but we're also doing it in a way that's fiscally responsible.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's right. And real estate's an interesting thing. Like I've got a interesting relationship with real estate. I feel like I've missed like every real estate cycle that I could have gotten into over the last 20 years. You know what I mean?
Well,
But
can
it's
we talk about that?
yeah, let's talk about that because I think a lot of people are like that. And I've got my house and I've owned homes for 20 years probably. Like, you know what I mean? And I've moved up every time, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then I'm like, well, I could have bought that house too, and that house too, and that house too. But I feel so you feel like you missed sort of like those ground entry points. Like, yeah, let's talk about that.
Well, so and then what you're talking about, I think, is more like buying in at the bottom of the market, and you can't really predict where the bottom of any market's going to be. This is the great thing with real estate, stock market too, is that over time it trues up, it balances out. Like
Yeah.
even in the Great Recession, right? So we bought when the market was in decline in the Great Recession. So we bought our first house early 2009, late 2008. Bought this great little Dutch colonial in the North End. I thought we got a smoking deal. I remember saying in my infinite wisdom, like, oh, this is going to be a great house. It's the bottom of the market. and the market continued to decline. This little $240,000 house was suddenly worth like 170, you know?
Yeah.
Well, look, I'm just living, working, I can afford the payment. And this is the thing that most people forget. Like over time, we will be okay. We need to live somewhere anyways. We need to be able to afford the payment. What that house taught me was how to tend to the house, how to be responsible with my budget, how much house I could comfortably afford, that I could buy a house, that I was worthy of owning a home. And, that house, even in the Great Recession, which was a 50% fall off the cliff, right? Like house prices declined 50% in this area in the Great Recession.
Hmm.
It only took about 5 years for home values to get back in alignment with where they should have been if there was a natural trajectory the entire way.
Yeah.
So even this fall off, we always feel like, oh, we missed out or we didn't buy at the bottom. And we didn't buy at the bottom. We bought here. The market kept tanking and then it came back up. And then we sold when we got back to true, right? That move into our second home did a lot for us. But I think there's always this fear that we kind of miss the market. It's pretty simple. The market's usually going to be in your favor when people are exiting the market and they don't want to buy. So when you buy, when people don't want to buy, that's a great time to buy. Right now, people don't want to buy. That's why it's a great time to buy. You have less competition because there's high interest rates. So it's a little challenging, but the people that take the risk of a higher interest rate and they find a way to get through that payment, they're going to get a better deal than the people who don't. But even if we missed the mark a little bit, over time, this is an unbelievable place to own real estate because, salaries are high, wages are high, people are moving to the Northwest in droves. Like I think Tacoma is massively undervalued historically. I think that Tacoma and the suburbs of Tacoma, the gig harbors, university places, they haven't been looked at regionally. I mean, I'm from Mount Vernon. So even in Mount Vernon, we thought, oh my gosh, Tacoma, that's not a great place to live. I think the locals in Tacoma had this like crown jewel in the north end and they didn't want anybody to know about it. So we didn't talk about it. And the cat's out of the bag. So, where Tacoma and Seattle should have been appreciating on a parallel trajectory, they just didn't. Seattle appreciated faster than Tacoma did historically. And now Tacoma is closing that gap. And so that's going to be it. I feel like we're in a great time and space to be in the business that we're in this city. But also, if you don't, own a home yet, you should really lock in that it's going to get more and more challenging to own. And as we already demonstrated, if you want to really grow your wealth over time, you need to own a house. So this is a great time to break into the market.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think you can't look at, well, I missed it, so I'm going to wait again. Right. You
Correct.
just got to get in because you're right. Like in my own experience, like every house I bought went up, but I had that house where I bought at the middle of the market, I thought, and it went down and I had to wait 5 or 6 years before I could break even again on it, but I stayed in it. Right. And then that put me into my house, which I'm in now, which was, very successfully moved up in value. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think it's exactly right. And I'm saying the same thing. Well, I wish I would have moved into this neighborhood earlier, but then now I'm like, well, I'm glad I did when I did. Right. And so, and it's not that much different. So let's transition a little bit. So we use our house as an asset. We see it as an investment. It is like for most people, it's their biggest investment, right?
Yes.
And where I come in on the estate planning side, tell me through real estate, as a realtor's perspective, like when do you see estate planning being the thing to do for your clients?
Yeah, well, we've learned over time, and this is not a conversation we used to have. Like, I think that I'm qualified to say I'm a real estate expert. I've helped about 1,000 families. I think that when I helped about 100 families, I was not an expert. I didn't understand how these pieces fit together. You just referenced when you bought, getting stuck in the house for 3 to 5 years. Experts should be having that conversation. They should be having a consultation and saying, hey, based on the cycle we're in the market, this could be a 3 to 5 year play. Worst case scenario, you might be stuck there for 5 years, right? And so those are the kinds of conversations we're having with our clients. And one of the conversations we're having with our clients now, which is why I'm so excited about our relationship together, is when you own a home, like you just said, it's an asset. But in this area, by definition, it's a $500,000 asset. It's a big deal. And it's a $500,000 asset that on average is going to appreciate about 5% annually. So, if that's the case, then over 5 years, that's 25%. So it's a $500,000 asset that turns into a $600,000 asset that could very well end up a $700,000 asset. That's a lot of money. That's real money. And so we tell people when they own a home, they need to get involved with an estate planner and have a plan. And unfortunately, too many of them don't do that, right? If you own a house, you need to know what's going to happen to it if something happens to you, period. We come in, unfortunately, too often. I had this conversation yesterday. Woman passed away. There's not a plan for what's going to happen with the property. So now we're trying to figure out who has the authority to sell it.
Hmm.
Family members want to get the liquid asset. They don't want to maintain the house. There's no reason to maintain the house. The house is actually being devalued because it's not being maintained. So it's worth less and less. And nobody knows who's going to have the authority or when we're going to have the authority to actually help them sell it because that plan and that directive wasn't in place. So if you buy a house, if you own a house, if you have a family, our recommendation to our real estate clients, we're involved in these conversations because we want to have a great relationship. We want them to be healthy and happy is, that's when it's time to make sure you have an estate plan.
Yeah. No, and I think you're exactly right. Like when you mentioned like the life cycle of a house or the buying cycle is about 5 years, right? You're moving
Mm-hmm.
maybe every 5 years on average. That's kind of the same cycle that I tell my clients, like, look at your plan every 2 to 5 years, you know, because in that 5 years, like you said, if your house goes up 5% a year, you're up 25%, right?
Correct.
And assuming your other assets are doing the same thing in the stock market, maybe even more, your assets are changing. And so that review of getting your estate plan sort of tweaked or updated to reflect your new net worth in most cases is significant, right?
Right. Or if in my case, your family is changing, right? So
Yeah,
we
yeah.
establish our estate plan and then we have twins. So boom,
That's
right?
right. Yes, that's right. Yes, major life events is the 2 to 5 years, or major life events is what we say to update your estate plan on. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's a tip for me to have in my bag too, because we want our clients to come back to us and ask these questions. And I got a phone earlier with a client of ours who we're dealing with a lot of people who are transitioning right now. And I think it's a cycle in the market. I also think it speaks to how we serve clients, what we bring to the table for them. We have quite a few clients who are selling out of the real estate market because their homes if you own in the Northwest, you should know that your house is worth more today than it's ever been worth. If you read the headlines and you think it's a bad time to sell a house, it's worth more than it's ever been worth. So we have people that are beginning to cash out of the market, move into their retirement phase. They're going to Arizona. They're going to some of the beautiful retirement communities that we have, Frank Toby Jones, Merrill Gardens. So when we have people beginning to transition there, we want to be a part of that plan. And sometimes, unfortunately, they have the house, they have the assets, but they don't have the plan.
Yeah.
And so we're coming in the middle in those cases. And I just think life gets in the way too much, but having a plan for that transition up front makes a big difference. And our clients that have that plan in place, it's a much easier conversation. I can call you and say, hey, what is the plan for this client? How does my piece fit under that umbrella? Because that's how it's supposed to look, right?
No, and that's why the team approach is so important, I think. And an
Mm-hmm.
undervalued part of the team is a person that's really a real estate expert. Like we always say, okay, have an accountant and you should have a financial planner and you should have an attorney. But in reality, we should have a trusted real estate advisor that's sort of in that same team, right? It's a part of that same team to sort of help us make that plan. Because if you sort of consider that as that, like we keep talking about, that's your biggest investment or one of your biggest investments, you should have someone that's advising you on that investment. And oftentimes, in your case, you're not charging them by the hour or by just to tell them,
No,
you might have a
no.
potential sale down the road, but you're not going to charge them by the hour for advice, most cases,
You,
probably.
you might be onto something there. Maybe.
I know. That's maybe it, man.
No, but I agree. What other profession do we do work and not tabulate our hours and our hourly rate and just say, if and when you sell, make sure you do it with us? There's a lot of trust involved, but you hit the nail on the head. Everybody should have a real estate expert and a real estate advisor. Unfortunately, there's not enough of them in the market space. The barrier for entry is really low. I mean, I got my license in 30 days.
Mhm.
But I didn't get my expertise for about 3 years.
Yeah.
And it really is a challenge to make it. But a great real estate agent is worth their weight in gold because we know everybody. We know how the white collar world works. We can pull all the pieces together. We're not intimidating. We don't charge for that vision, like of the pieces you need to pull together. We understand what your house is worth. We can tell you what bucket you have there, which is the catalyst for understanding if you can retire, if you can invest in real estate, if you can move up. Absolutely right. And if people don't have that person in their network, they've got to find it.
Yeah. No, I think it's critical. It's such an underemphasized part of someone's planning, for sure.
I think, unfortunately, if you have a real estate agent in your network, so statistic is we all know 5 real estate agents. Did you know that?
I think
So,
it's about
I mean,
right.
yeah, you probably know more, but like
I know
even,
way more than that. Yeah.
yeah. And so we all know 5. So here's my leading question. We all know 5 and you know way more than 5, but how many do you know that operate like this?
No. Yeah.
Not enough. And so I think that unfortunately, most people assume that it's all the same. And so they don't use that person as their go-to because that person doesn't have the value. I wish more people did, but I think it's also a blessing for us that we do, and some of the competition does not.
Yeah. No, I know, well, I probably know 100 real estate agents, you know what I mean, that I've met over the years, but I have a handful, like two or three or four that I maybe trust, right? Of which you're definitely on my
Yeah.
top part of my list. And because of that approach, right? Because of that client first approach, the investment approach, the advisor approach, the holistic, like this is part of your plan approach. And that's why I think it's so important that people find like anybody can be a realtor. There's so many part-time realtors, and depending on the market, there's a lot more part-time realtors. You know what I mean? And
Yep.
in my case, I've got clients that want to sell properties, and I'm like, I don't want you to use just anybody. You want to use someone that knows what they're doing, and this is their focus, and this is their expertise. And that's why I appreciate having you as part of my referral network to have on my list to send out to my clients.
Well, thank you. Do you know, would it be helpful if I shared like what I would look for in a good realtor or how I would find a good realtor?
Yes, that would be very good for
Yeah.
that. I'm sure the people listening would be super interested in hearing that.
Yeah, I mean, hey, look, we serve primarily Pierce County. We get into King and Thurston a little bit. But there's areas we don't serve. So if you're listening and you're not in those areas, or maybe you don't vibe with me, maybe you want the resources we have, but my communication style isn't quite right. I'm very direct, just so you know. I'm big on saying this is how we do it. So that's my style. But I think that most people I know, because I have the conversation, most people work with somebody who's family or friend first, right? And so you want a real estate agent who values their time because I know exactly what my time is worth. I know my hourly rate. I don't charge hourly, but I know my hourly earnings. You want somebody who's got a track record of success. We did a video a couple years ago, and I titled it "The Back of the Baseball Card." Stats for realtors. You can look them up. You can just look them
I
up,
don't know.
and the realtor can look them up. You know, if you're going to sit down and interview somebody, have them bring a report on what they've closed in your neighborhood in the last 6 months. What are they doing right now? My favorite real estate agent line is, "I've been doing this for 30 years." And I'm like, well, if you've been doing it for 30 years, why aren't you retired? You must not be very good.
Yes.
Right. So I don't need to know how long you've been doing it. I need to know how much experience you have in today's market and what other resources do you have. Right. And I want somebody who values their time, who sets boundaries on their time, because that's a professional. You may not like that. You may think that they should just be where and when you want them to be there. But if they're valuable and they're an impactful player, they're going to have a busy schedule. Right. And
Yeah.
so if you call a realtor and they show up in 5 minutes, that's probably not somebody who's doing enough business to move the needle for you. So those are just things that I would think about if I were going to hire a realtor. And I do hire realtors. I hire them in other markets. You know, like I'd like to buy a lake house. I'm not going to represent myself. Because the
Mhm.
final piece of the puzzle is a realtor that you hire has to be local. So if I buy a lake house in Eastern Washington, I'm by definition, I'm not local. I'm a Western Washington guy. I want the local expert there that knows the tone of the market because I'm paying them to know the market and to negotiate me a great deal.
Yeah. No, that's good advice. That's great advice. Because I feel like people well, my nephew's a realtor. You know, my brother's best friend's a realtor. You know, I think people lose on those deals more often than they win, you know?
They don't realize that they lost until it's so far south that they can't get out of it.
Yeah.
We have a lot of like, you know, and sometimes I'll have the save me conversation and I'll just say, look, I can't really get you out of the position that you're in, but here's maybe a step forward that'll help you out. And like my neighbor, for example, if I can tell the story, my neighbor bought a property that's directly below me. There's this little rental property that our house looks right upon, and it's a beautiful lot. And I said for the first couple of years that if that house ever comes to market, we got to nab that thing. It's
Yeah.
an amazing piece of property, 10,000 square foot lot in Proctor with a view, like super hard to find, but it's got this decrepit little rental on it. It goes on the market. My neighbor grabs the house and puts it under contract within hours. Like I don't even see it. You know, I'm the realtor in the neighborhood and I don't even see it. It goes under contract. But when I saw it go up to market, I was like, man, that's really expensive because with the quality of the rental on it, you're basically just buying the lot. And it was a $675,000 purchase. The structure had no value. A lot in the area is probably worth about $450,000, and they spent $675,000. With vacant land, if you have a bad structure on it, you got to knock it down.
Right.
So they spent $675,000. If you want to do anything, you got to knock the structure down. They were going to build and buy, or they were going to buy and build their dream home. So I started talking to my neighbor, and you know, we didn't have a business relationship. I'm not really forceful with my friends and my neighbors. If it's a fit, it's a fit. We had a conversation and I'm really excited. And they said, we're going to build our dream home. And I asked if they'd explored any of the expenses. I asked if they knew what the end product that they built was going to be worth. And they said no. And so how did this kind of come to pass? She said, it came to market. We were looking for a house on a lake up on the peninsula. And our realtor up there was a friend of ours. And we saw this and we just told them to write it up. And so they closed on it and they bought it. And my neighbor came to me and said, hey, Nick, if I build a house on this lot, is it going to be worth $3 million? I said, oh man, no, I haven't seen a $3 million sale in the city ever.
Yeah.
That has changed now, but at that point in time I hadn't. I said, man, I wish you would have asked me, because I'm local, I'm in the neighborhood, and I could have given you that advice, but now you have the house. Now, over time, as we already addressed earlier, over time, the land value has gone up. They're going to get out of it. So look at it in two things. They wouldn't have gotten in that position if they talked to somebody who was a local expert,
Mm-hmm.
right? Instead, they used their friend, they got put in a tough spot. Second thing, even with making what could have been a pretty dramatic mistake, they're going to get out of it just fine, right? So, I think that demonstrates a lot about what we've been talking about.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. That's exactly to the full circle. Well, Nick, I really appreciate you being on with us, the Legacy Talk podcast, and I'll put your information in the episode details. So anybody that wants to connect with Nick, what's the best way to connect with you? Maybe just for people that aren't going to look that in that spot.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple different ways. The first thing, I think, the free value add, we do a weekly video. We call it the value added video. Pretty catchy title. So we send that out to our listserv. And if you're interested in joining that listserv, you can connect with us through our website, which is commencementbaybrokers.com. Or you can just email the office. It's Nick, N-I-C, at commencement, no bay, brokers.com. So Nick at commencementbrokers.com is the way to email us. We're right in the North End in Proctor. And you can connect with us on social media too. So if you want to be a little bit more casual about it, you want the same information, you want to see what we're doing for work, we're on Instagram, Facebook. Yeah, and that's a great place to find us.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. Thanks again, and we'll talk soon.
Awesome. Thanks, James, for having me. See ya.
Thanks again for Nick Lind being on today's episode. It's really nice to have another perspective here on Legacy Talk and get some fresh ideas, fresh insights into ways that our clients and ways people can maximize their estate, create functional estate plans, and use their assets to their advantage. And it sometimes just takes other advisors, right? And I really believe in this team approach with advisors, with attorneys and financial advisors and realtors and CPAs working together, sort of coming up with these plans that best suit their clients. So that brings us to our story time, which we had a lot of stories with Nick, and he gave some great stories. Just a real quick tidbit from me on the same topic, as far as like using a realtor that's a professional realtor that's an expert in their field versus a part-time realtor, your brother's best friend that does real estate on the side. I have tons of clients, particularly probate clients, that have houses to sell for their parents. And Nick mentioned this in the interview, where he had a family that had this house that's depreciating in value because they don't know who's in charge. They have to figure out the probate side of things. But I have executors of estates where they just haven't gelled. I recommend realtors, the specific realtors like Nick, to my clients to help them through this sale process to maximize the sale for the benefit of the beneficiaries of an estate. And one story is a couple where the spouse, the wife, is the executor of the estate. There's multiple pieces of property all close together, very run down, but high value because they're in the city of Tacoma, and they're worth a lot of money. And they didn't like working with certain realtors, and so they decided to go it alone and try to sell it off market. And they received an offer that I thought was sketchy and I didn't think they should take, but it fizzled out. And now they're left with no buyers. And what happened was the person that put this offer on was trying to shop it out. He was a wholesaler. He was trying to shop it around to other investors and try to get a deal done, knowing he couldn't actually do it himself. And so it sort of put a stink on the deal, and it's a problem, right? It's turned into a problem for them where they're starting from scratch, and they might even have to wait, right, for the stink to go off of this offer, which for the benefit of the state isn't good. And so it goes to show what a good realtor does, because a good realtor will tell you straight up what the place is worth, what their strategy is going to be, how they're going to market it, who's the market, right? And not having a competent and expert realtor on your team really can lead to significant unintended consequences, because we're not all real estate. It's for the same reason you don't do your estate planning documents yourself and you go to an estate planning attorney like me, is you go to a professional realtor. It's a full-time realtor that's been doing it for a long time, that really has a ear to the market, really, and knows what is happening in the market, knows how to market your property, knows how to sell, right? That knows where the buyers are. And so it really makes a difference, significant difference. So if you didn't learn anything today, what I would recommend learning is using expert realtor who really knows what they're doing is critical in maximizing that asset for the benefit of yourself and your estate and your beneficiaries down the road. And so that brings us to the end of today's episode. There's no in the news segment today. We went long on this episode. I don't want to get too deep into this. So hopefully you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks for listening to today's episode of Legacy Talk. If you liked today's episode and would like to learn more, please like and subscribe for more great content. I've been your host, James Jones. To your legacy.
Thank you for listening to the Legacy Talk podcast by attorney James A. Jones. If you found today's episode helpful, we ask that you like and follow us on all major platforms so you don't miss out on the latest episode. If you have questions for Attorney Jones, reach out at info@joneslegacylaw.com or visit our website at joneslegacylaw.com. Join us again next week for another episode of the Legacy Talk podcast.